Hey, how's it going? I was talking with a colleague recently about some of this whole idea of interns and interning and apprentices and whatnot. So I don't know that there was a whole lot of people doing this back in the days when I first started, but nowadays I see a lot of people who are now claiming to be, I'm doing such and such with my intern, I'm giving my intern stuff, and I don't know, like I've seen. So when I first started this entire thing, when I first tried it out, I hadn't seen anybody else do it before. Okay, so the idea at the time, and this is what had happened, like true story. What had happened was that I had a business relationship with somebody. This business was, set to do great big things. We did quite a fair bit of sales. We were making plans against the income, the revenue that we were getting. We're talking about, the next steps and everything. And then the whole relationship fell apart because my partner at the time decided to go off and spend all our money that we had generated. And as it turned out, when it came to time to get paid to take our shares out of it, there wasn't any money left. And so I had all these plans that just fell apart. And it didn't make sense to me at the time to continue in this relationship because I felt that the relationship was a very straining one. It was not a great. It wasn't really the best of. I mean, okay, it was in terms of creativity. It was a partnership made in heaven. It was amazing. We really complemented each other well with our creative ideas, with our thoughts and things that we were doing. Like we were, on the cutting edge of everything. We're revolutionizing the industry. The problem is that without discipline, this business was doomed to fail. Now, I can tell you I can tell from a mile away which businesses, no matter how good the business idea is, are going to fall apart. So a few years ago, I had got into another partnership, another business with some family members. And the business was absolutely amazing. It was going, like, in terms of business idea, the product was excellent. The business idea was fantastic. Everything about it was really good. But I could tell about probably from the first few days, perhaps from the first week or so, that this business was doomed to fail. I knew it. I was like, dude, I should not be putting everything on the line for this business, because I could tell from the way that it was like the stakeholders in the business were behaving. I could tell that they were not really entrepreneurially minded, and they held all the cards. So I couldn't actually. I didn't have the kind of influence to turn this in the direction that it needed to go. I was basically the weakest player out of everybody in this partnership. It's just the dynamic of it was, like I said, as a family business. Everybody was basically my elder, and everybody's say was basically worth more than mine, despite the fact that nobody else had business experience. So I could tell that business was doomed to fail. And in the same way with this business, I could tell that this was not, no matter how good everything else about this business was, it just wasn't going anywhere good. So what I did was I bailed. I got out of there. I said, like, okay, you know what? I'm going to cut my losses. I'm not going to invest any more into this business. It's really difficult to work with somebody who is not, disciplined about money, who is, okay with eating basically your share of the profits and not taking any responsibility for it, because that person was also damaging my reputation in the industry because he'd taken other people's. We had partners, we had other people who had helped us, we had employees to pay and stuff like that, and none of those people had mattered. I paid for some of those things out of my own pocket, but for the most part, nothing else was basically I knew that continuing to align with this guy was going to get me in a lot of trouble, and it wasn't where I wanted to be. So I got out of that business, and I found myself now in a position where I had all these ideas, all these things that I was trying to do, and I didn't have a way to execute them because they had relied on having the income from the business that we had put together to be able to afford these people. So I talked to a guy who was, until now, probably the best programmer that I'd ever known. We had talked about, he'd just finished his PhD or master's, I forget which it was at the time. And by the way, he now has his own startup company in VR, and it's absolutely amazing the stuff that he's doing with it. He's got some incredible ideas. So I talked to him about bringing him onto my team, and building some, like I had a social networking project that's a pet project. I've never seen anything like it till this day. I've been planning it out for years and years. Never, had the time or I've got parts of the prototype for it ready, but I've never had the time or the financial resources to get it off the ground, because it will need like some pretty serious programming to get it off the ground. So it's just, sitting there until probably somebody down the line will end up, picking up this project. So I found myself in this position. I was like, okay, what am I going to do? What's my solution? And I figured, okay, you know what? I have a skill set that people pay money to get access to. So people have and continue to pay me just for for a conversation with me, to have a consultation where I would advise them on their business. There are, I've sold programs in which the entire, premise of the program is that you get to have access to me on a regular basis and get, help from me, coaching and advice on what to do with your business. And I thought, well, what would be kind of cool is if we could resurrect some of that stuff from the old days where, I could actually swap skills with somebody, like back in the old days, that was that concept of an apprentice where, if you wanted your kid to become, a blacksmith or something like that, you send him off to basically apprentice with a blacksmith. And he would, learn the trade and so on. And then eventually he'd go off and make a life around that career that he'd acquired. And I thought, that would be so cool if I could create something like that. So what I did was I created this intern program in which people would come and they would, have some raw skills, and I would make use of their skills. And we would, rather than have them pay me money to get my advice and, my direction and so on, I would help them in building a business, and they would get they would offer me their time in this place. So they'd pick up the skills that I would be teaching them. They would be able to build a business and start to be able to make money. And I actually structured this thing. So it wasn't a thing where you would just, okay, you're going to come, you're going to, watch me while I work and whatever, and you're just going to basically be working for me for free, which is what most of the people implementing these intern programs are doing. They just bring on a guy or a girl or whatever, and they're like, okay, you help me out, and that's sufficient. Basically you watch what I do, you learn from me whatever I give you, which is, it's not entirely wrong. It's not entirely wrong. The problem is that if it's not structured, you end up with basically somebody who feels like they're really being taken advantage of. Somebody who feels they're not really gaining, anything of value that they could actually benefit from. And I experienced that firsthand. Like one of the, it started to become an issue. Obviously, I was learning as I was going. And in theory, the idea makes sense. It makes perfect sense. People are paying large amounts of money to have access to me. When you are working with me, you get all of my secrets. You get to know how I think about things. There's like, for instance, the guy who was doing, who was one of the guys who stuck around with me for the longest. He was doing pay-per-click campaign. He was building pay-per-click campaigns. Now, this thing was basically, the technique was my trade secret. Okay, I had made money with this very technique, selling coaching programs where people would come out and sit with, like masterminds, where they would come out and sit with me and a group of other guys. And that was the highlight. That was like the core thing that the entire program was being built around. Like, that was like the most important, the most substantial part of it. It was basically that you would come out of it. It was a revolutionary way to sort of package deal a traffic campaign where you didn't need to maintain this, or rather, there was no need for me to maintain your campaign. We would just build it, and then you could take it and actually run with it. So that was kind of the proprietary technique that we're talking about. And I was included in all these masterminds with other guys because they liked how, other trainers, because they liked that was something that they could offer the students. So I taught him this method, and I was also selling this as a service for some time as well, for many years. Basically, that was my primary source of income. It was a very successful method. So when I showed him this technique, I would have not really shown it to anybody, not in a training program, not in a training nothing. I would have not like given it to anybody, because this is my trade secret. This is like how I do it. This is worth real money. So I was even, hesitant to give him the entire technique, and it took us some time to get to that point where I could, fully trust him and give him all of that. So it makes sense that in that case that I've given you this trade secret of mine that that is worth a lot of money, that has earned me a lot of money and continued to earn me a lot of money, that I could then say, hey, I'm going to teach you this, and then you're going to give me your service. You're going to work for me. So there's nothing wrong with that. The problem is that in theory, what works in theory doesn't necessarily apply in practice. So pretty soon I started to find that, and I had a really nice, it was a really nice, well-structured program. It tried to be fair to the people. So there were targets, which if you got to the point where you had built up enough experience and knowledge that now you're ready, right? You're ready to start transitioning into having your own practice, your own business. Then you would get guidance in building your own business around some sub aspect of what you were doing with me, and it was like a very structured program. Where we would do that, and once somebody would get to that rank, would say, "Hey, look, guess what? You're advanced. Now you can actually earn money. Now it's not just a matter of helping out; you're getting money, but it's a discount. So they'd get a discounted. They would earn money, but it wouldn't be the full rate of somebody who was a contractor. So I would basically be getting it at a cheaper price." Which is also okay. I mean, I taught you the method. You're basically, you got to try out and learn, and with my help, you owe me that. You owe me, I think, that you would owe me that sort of a discount at the very least to start with. And that is just a transitional stage, which again, once they'd finished the stage, the next level was to, become a full contractor, where there would be a discount implied, but that discount would not be such a significant one. It'd just be a small discount to sort of, it's like a wholesale deal because you're referring plenty of business in that direction. So that was the theoretical. Not all of this was fully, realized in practice, but that was the intent behind it. And so I had this pretty streamlined thing going on. I had a lot of people working together, and they were, learning quite a few things. And we had people coming in and people leaving. Of course, that was, part of the deal. Some people were not; they just weren't cut out for it. Some people, lost interest pretty quickly. Some people weren't dedicated, motivated enough. Some people, they really stuck to it and they got something genuine out of it. And we built up these manuals. That was part of the process as well, was to create procedures and manuals to describe all the processes so that they would be formalized. And that is actually, that was the base of a lot of the super traffic machine, was the manuals that we had put together internally to take our, like, to train new guys, because we always had new people coming in, and you had to train them on how to do this particular method, and they should be able to like plug into the whole thing, and we wanted to make use of their work, so that they were like, they didn't necessarily come in with a whole lot of skill, but we still needed to make use of their work as, real, real world stuff. We had clients who were paying money for this, for these services, and they expected to get quality out of it. So this is what, a lot of the base of the super traffic machine manuals was those procedure manuals that we had for our interns. Now, I'll tell you all of this because I want to share with you the experience of what that was really like, and some of the things that I learned along the way that I think would be, valuable to learn, to know about human nature, and for you also, as you move forward in your business. It might become attractive at some point to say, hey, you know what, I can't afford to, or I don't want to spend money on hiring somebody, so I'm going to go and, and there's all these different methods that people use to avoid hiring. One of those methods is to say, hey, let me take on a partner. And I've seen this one backfire a lot. I don't do it. I don't fall for this one, for this silliness often. I haven't fell for it often. So I've seen people who, at the beginning of the business, they're like, okay, I need a programmer, for instance. I can't afford to hire a programmer, so what I'll do is, I know this guy, he knows how to program. Let me offer him, 50% of the business to be the programmer for our site. So it sounds like a great idea. When you're making zero, 50% of zero is pretty, okay. You don't mind giving away 50% of zero. Especially when the alternative is to pay somebody thousands of dollars to do the same work. So they go and they say, let's do that. That sounds like a great idea. The other dude who does accept the risk and goes along with it, well, the only reason he's done it is because, it's a risk. Like, he's going to actually put up his time and energy and effort into this thing, and the only thing he has to expect coming back from it is that he's going to get paid when this thing ever starts to make money. So the moment it starts to make money, a lot of the time, what happens is you start, the guy who, if you had decided to make such a decision, you're like, oh shit, like 50% of 100,000 is a shit ton of money. That's a lot of money, and and I'm paying this every month. And you wrote this program like once. It's like, and we've been using the same software for all this time, and I keep paying him, and I got to keep paying them half of the money for this. Yeah, that's the problem, because that was a dumb decision on your part when you were, that should have been taken correctly to begin with. That is a role that should have been hired out. You need to find a way to hire it out, one way or the other. It's not, when you want to get in partnership with somebody, they've got to be providing something that you cannot provide. And that was one of the problems that we had, for instance, in the family business. We were, the reason that we had taken on a number of partners into the business, I was against it, by the way, was because they were going to be the financial backers of the business. The problem is that they were all employees, and they couldn't, put up a few million dollars to back the business, which is, if we could have got a couple of $1 million to get the business off the ground, yeah, we could have probably done a lot of stuff with a couple of $1 million, right? And if we found somebody who could come up with a couple of $1 million, that person would have probably deserved to take like 50% of the business to supply that sort of money. But what actually happened was we gave away something like 80% of the business to financial backers. And all that they'd put up was something like $100,000, which was not anywhere near enough to do much with. And you gave up 80% equity of the business just for that. And honestly, that's not really a smart decision, right? That's not a smart decision. I know that, for them, it was a large amount of money. But if you really think about it, the business needed far more than that to really take off. And so to give somebody that much equity that person should be really giving the business some, major advantage that you couldn't get in another way, that you couldn't, find some other way to get it. And in the same way, with, for instance, a job that you could have basically hired out, if you'd come up with $10,000, you could have probably got the the entire software of the back end software of your idea built, whatever it is. I know that for $10,000 you can pretty much build at least a running, working commercial prototype of just about any application that you want. That's kind of like ballpark around about where you got to do it. So if you come up with $10,000 somehow. You could have just hired that out. That's it. You don't have to worry about continually paying somebody for it. Well, it's the same thing with the intern program. The reality is that reality does not necessarily work the same as in theory. So what I found was that these people who I'd brought in, they started to look at the money, and they're like, hey, you're making a lot of money. Doing what exactly? We're doing all the work. Why shouldn't we make this money? They stopped actually recognizing that, yeah, you only know this thing because I taught it to you, number one. So you're using my technique, my method, my guidance to do this, right? You couldn't have produced any of this on your own. It's my product idea. That is my service, my product idea. It's my reputation that is bringing these customers to us, right? And it is me who is selling this, and it is me who is edifying you, basically putting you up on a pedestal and saying, I trust this guy to do it. If I didn't say that I trust you to do this work, people would not be willing to spend the money that they're spending with me to get access to you, right? And that's what they couldn't really grasp that. They started to sort of they started to get a high opinion of themselves and of what they're doing. And despite the fact that I was it's not like they were unpaid at this point. They were receiving compensation. It wasn't, necessarily consistent compensation. So this is what I'm going to talk about. It wasn't necessarily a consistent compensation, but I was definitely, breaking my own rules. Things like whenever there was extra business outside this thing, I always sent it their way. Now, the deal was that I would get a cut from that, and I never took that cut. I just wanted to be, part of that so that I was aware of what was going on. These were my customers, they were my clientele. And then pretty soon I found them starting to actually get their heads together. And so they're now using my resources. These are my people, essentially, my team. And they started to poach members of my team to work on the exact same idea being sold under their names, for the same price, trying to basically undercut me. They were taking my customers that I had referred to them and told them that, to trust these guys. They started to take those customers and try to, render services to them and cut me out of it, despite the fact that I wasn't even taking the cut that I was supposed to be taking for referring the business their way. And they got really cocky. They started, saying things like, "Oh, that's just not worth my time," and that kind of thing. And I just shut the program down because I didn't like the fact that there was so much ungratefulness and ingratitude in the entire thing. Now, what did I learn from this, and what can I pass on to you? Apart from the things that I did pass on, I think that one of the really important things that that I learned from this is. It all sounds very nice in theory. I could sit here and justify it, but people don't fit into this little box of rationality, of logic. We're all like this. I know that one famous quote from Gary Halbert was, "I know the exact moment that I lose interest in a client's project, the moment I cash his check." I know that sounds really fucked up and mean, but actually I completely get that. That is a sentiment that most of us feel. After you cash the check, after you've won the business, you start to feel almost like you're working for free, especially when it's when you just take one lump sum. If you're taking it on a monthly basis, it may feel different, but it feels like you're working for free. The longer this thing goes on, the more you feel like, dude, come on, dude, you forget that the part where you collected the money, you start to forget. It's the same thing when you take a loan or something like that, and then you come to pay it back. You start to feel like you're wasting this money. You forget how desperately you needed it when somebody had offered to give it to you. So it's not rational. People are not very rational. We're not necessarily logical creatures, and so you cannot assume rationality and logic to be the underlying thing behind people. So what I realized the best thing to do is, if you want to bring on an intern, which I think is still a wonderful idea, that exchange is still fantastic. It's still useful. If you do bring on an intern, number one, don't let them be privy to the details of the money, because at the end of the day, they start to think that, they actually have worth. They don't. The reality is that they don't have worth. What they have worth in is the grunt work that they do for you. All right. So if you do take on an intern, remember that their worth is just in the grunt work that they do. And so that is basically just it's not even a skilled labor, it's labor, right? So they don't need to know the ins and outs of your money. How many sales you did, how many customers you have, they don't need to know about that stuff. Number two, what you need to do too is to agree about compensation. Give them some compensation, some monthly consistent compensation. It doesn't have to be, a lot of money because they are training on the job, but give them some compensation, because the moment that you give them some compensation, they don't feel like they're being taken advantage of and that they're working for free at any point. They get the training and they get the money. The money is low because they're getting training, right? The money is low because you're learning on the job. So I can't give you, both. You are giving them both, but I can't give you both a lot of money and training. Presumably, if I'm going to be training you, then I shouldn't be paying you. And if you are good enough at your job, I shouldn't have to train you. So therefore, I'll pay you, and that would be it. So if you're going to be hiring, if you're going to be bringing on an intern, assume that you're going to be paying them. Give them some money. Make sure it's consistent. Don't leave it up to chance. Agree about the money up front. And then talk about some milestone that you want to have where, once they hit this milestone, then we're going to talk about a different thing. So there's got to be an exit to your to any agreement. There has to be a way to leave the agreement. There has to be a way to renegotiate the agreement. So always put and I do this, by the way, with all my agreements, not just, interns, but even partnerships, whatever. Put a deadline on it. Be like, every 3 months we're going to reconvene. We're going to discuss, see where we're at, what we're feeling, and then we'll, decide if we want to make some changes. This allows you to change your mind, to reevaluate things and adjust course if that's necessary. And it allows them to do the same, so they can voice their concerns. They can say, hey, you know what, I feel like I'm not being compensated enough or whatever. And then, maybe at that point, if you really value them and you have the ability to increase their what you're paying them, you could do that. And if you can't, then you'd let them know why you can't and when you might be able to, and so on. So that's really important to have that that sort of open discussion with them. It's really important to have the money because it works as motivation. It gives you, and I've never liked it when friends would come to me and be like, I'll pay you. I don't want you to pay me. You know why I don't want you to pay me? And this is the exact reason why you should pay these guys, right? I don't want my friend or my family member to pay me, because the moment that they pay me and I'm going to give them a discount, I'm going to go easy on them. Normally I'd charge somebody a couple of $1,000s an hour of consultation. That's okay, man. All right, fine. You want to pay me? You insist. Give me a couple of $100. Now he thinks he owns me for that $200. So I'll never take the money from them. When it is a family member or whatever, I say, no, it's cool, man. I don't want to do it. I don't want any money from you. Otherwise, I don't want to do the job. I don't want to do it for you, because I don't want them to own me. But that's the exact reason why you should pay them, why you should pay your intern, because then you have the right to demand from them. All right. So that's my pointers for you today. That's been my experience. I hope that you like that. Let me know if you want to hear more.